ओके, आप स्टार्ट कर सकते हो अपना सर प्लीज।
All right, so the topic for today is cystic diseases of kidney. So there are few of the topics that come under the heading that are important. Okay, so the way that we're going to go through about it is we're first going to introduce the topic, then we're going to talk about the different diseases that come under the heading of cystic diseases of the kidney. So there's simple cyst, there's multicystic renal dysplasia, there's acquired cystic disease, there's polycystic kidney disease, there's cystic disease of renal medulla. During the course of the lecture, if there are any questions you guys have, you can always put it up in the chat, or you can raise your hand and you can ask. All right, so these are the diseases we're going to be talking about. So for introduction, we have cystic diseases of kidney, which are basically heterogeneous, comprising of hereditary development and acquired disorders. So this is a definition in order to define the idea of cystic disease. Moving on to the first disease under the heading, that is of simple cyst. So simple cyst can be single or multiple, and it usually involves the cortex. So upon gross examination, you will see a translucent body, which is basically lined by gray, glistening and smooth membrane with clear fluid. Under microscope, you will see a single layer of cuboidal or flattened cuboidal cells. So these are the two things that you can see. So the basic idea is that simple cyst is usually not something that shows up in your uroscopy most of the time. So, but this can be given to you in a BCQ. You need to be sure what things you can see. So the idea is to be able to differentiate between these different. So in case of simple cyst, you will see that's either single. A case will be given to you which will either have single or multiple cysts. Number one, it will only involve the cortex. Number three, upon gross examination, will be translucent and will have clear fluid. Upon microscope, if we'll see cuboidal cells. And there may also be a history given of pain or distension, which usually occurs when there is hemorrhage in simple cyst. So these are the things you can differentiate it upon with other conditions in cystic disorders. Multicystic renal dysplasia, it's a sporadic disease which can be unilateral or bilateral. Gross appearance is enlarged, irregular and multicystic, as the name itself is self-explanatory. Histological examination, you will find presence of undifferentiated mesenchyme with cartilage and immature collecting ducts. So this is a picture that's also given in Robbins. So this is basically showing multicystic renal. Now we've already said that it can be unilateral or bilateral. Okay. So this is a picture of multicystic renal dysplasia. Secondly, this is a histological picture which is showing disorganized architecture. So there's no organization. If you've seen a normal slide of the kidney, you'll see that there are usually glomeruli that's present over there, and there's an organization to the entire slide. But in this case, it's all distorted, number one. Number two, they're dilated tubules with cuffs of primitive stroma, and you have the islands of cartilage. So an island is basically when they're not connected to anything, right? They're free on either sides. So this is basically what you have over here. It's basic an island of cartilage. Here is your dilated tubule. And if you see generally, there is a disorganized or distorted pattern that we can see on this slide. Acquired cystic disease, which is also known as associated with dialysis, and usually occurs in patients who are suffering from end-stage renal disease. And it forms due to oxalate crystals or obstruction of tubules by interstitial fibrosis, and they have an increased risk of developing renal cell carcinoma. So if you get a BCQ which talks about a patient who's been on frequent dialysis, and if they give you an entire situation of acquired cystic disease, and then in the end they might not ask you what disease it is, because that's too simple a question to make. They might ask you what risk can they face. So renal cell carcinoma is one that can occur in cases in this. Very simple. End-stage renal disease, dialysis associated usually due to oxalate crystals or obstruction of tubules. And number 3, have increased risk of renal cell carcinoma. Any questions so far? If not, we'll move on. Okay. So now this is the major chunk when we talk about cystic disease. The first thing that comes to our mind is polycystic kidney disease, and this is a very important topic for your exam, for BCQs or SKI. Let it be on any side. This is a very, very important topic. So you need to be really, really well versed in it. So polycystic kidney disease, you have two types. You have autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease and you have autosomal recessive. Now, autosomal dominant is basically uh, found in adults, while the autosomal recessive is found in kids. So first we're going to discuss about the dominant polycystic kidney disease. So what is it? It is a hereditary disorder characterized by multiple expanding cysts of both kidneys that ultimately destroy the renal parenchyma and result in renal failure. And this one mostly occurs bilaterally. So there are 2-3 things that you can highlight in this definition. Number 1, that it's multiple expanding and occurs bilaterally. Number 2. Number 3, and it destroys the renal parenchyma. And number 4, it results in renal failure. So these are the things that can be highlighted in the definition and in this particular slide. So talking about its pathogenesis, it's pretty basic. It takes a little while to absorb in. Give it a thorough read. We put up on Edmodo, so you can give it a thorough read for, let's say, twice or thrice, and then you guys might be able to get it. So when we talk about pathogenesis, so mutation occurs in PKD gene PKD1 and PKD2. So PKD1 is present on chromosome 16 and occurs in 85% of the cases. So PKD1 is that gene that is in majority of the cases is mutated. So in turn, because of PKD1 gene's mutation, it causes mutation of polycystin 1, which is basically an integral protein membrane, and it's expressed in tubular epithelial cells and is involved in cell-to-cell interactions as well as cell-to-matrix interactions. So this is what polycystin does. So now once polycystin 1 is mutated, it will result into it has a lot of detrimental effects, which we'll discuss in the slides to come. PKD2 gene is located on chromosome 4 and results in mutation of polycystin 2, which is expressed in segments of renal tubules and functions as a calcium permeable cation channel. Okay, so now you have 2 genes and you have 2 integral proteins which are getting mutated. So you need to be able to remember this. PKD1 is present on chromosome 16. And what does it do? It mutates polycystin 1, which is basically an integral protein. And it's generally its function is unknown, but one of the few theories is that it helps in interaction, cell-to-cell interaction and cell-to-matrix interaction. PKD2 gene is located on chromosome 4 and it results in polycystin mutation, which is basically present on renal tubules and function as a calcium permeable cation channel. So both of these genes end up mutating polycystin 1 and 2. And PKD1, one more thing to add is present in majority of the cases. Mutation is present in majority of the cases. So these things have to be remembered. Okay, so as I talked about earlier, so if you have mutations in polycystin 1 and 2, you have altered mechanosensation of tubular cilia and you have altered calcium flux. As we talked about, cell-to-cell interaction, cell-to-matrix interaction is being destroyed, as well as calcium channels, which polycystin 2 looks over, is also being destroyed. So in totality, what does it do? It causes an altered tubular epithelial growth and differentiation. which results in abnormal extracellular matrix, cell proliferation, and causes fluid secretion, which all will result into formation of the cyst. Now, the complications that can occur with cyst is either it can cause glomerular or vascular damage, two of these points, or it can cause interstitial inflammation or fibrosis. So these are the things I need to do. Just another review of the slide again. So what is it doing is that mutation in polycystin 1 and 2 resulting into affecting two functions of the kidney. Number one is altered calcium flux. Number two is mechanosensation of the tubular cilia. All of them will result into altered tubular epithelial growth and differentiation. Moreover, will end up resulting into abnormal extracellular matrix, cell proliferation, and fluid secretion, which will cause a cyst formation. Now, that cyst, the complication of that cyst can either be interstitial inflammation, fibrosis, or glomerular or vascular damage. Any questions so far? Okay, moving on. We'll talk about how it looks upon gross examination. The kidneys are bilaterally enlarged with no intervening parenchyma. When you look at it on histology, you will see cysts are filled with serous clear fluid and sometimes hemorrhagic fluid. They may be enlarged enough to approach upon the calyces and pelvis. The Bowman capsule and glomerular tufts are found within the cyst. Now what happens is that the cyst grows so big that it ends up engulfing the Bowman capsule and the glomerulus. So it will show glomerular tufts and Bowman capsules with it. So you have gross examination, you have kidneys that are bilaterally enlarged. On histology, you will see cysts which are filled with fluid, serous or clear, and can sometimes be hemorrhagic. And they're so big that they encroach upon the calyces and pelvis of the kidney. And Bowman capsule and glomerular tufts can be seen within it. So this is a picture again taken from Robbins. We've got figure A and figure B. So what it's showing is that figure A is just showing you the external growth. So all of these bubbles that you can see, or you can call them bubbles, okay? So these are filled with clear fluid, and these all are cysts that are present. In figure B, what we see is that it's a bisected gross picture of the kidney. And it shows numerous dilated cysts. So you've got these dilations that are all over here showing that this is a kidney of polycystic. This is a polycystic. All right. So one more thing that can occur in a polycystic kidney disease is that it can have extrarenal influence as well. So extrarenal associations as well. So what happens is that they can end up in the liver as well. We'll discuss it as we move on. But it can be in liver as well, it can be in heart, it can be in spleen, it can be in pancreas. So this is a gross picture of what it looks like in the liver. So there are these liver cysts. See these? There are these liver cysts. That can be seen. Okay, Ravi, let me just complete this and I'll come back to it. Okay, so the thing with this is that there's multiple cysts have been formed in the liver as well. And that's how you can see it in a drawing, right? Okay. Coming back to Ravi's question, Ravi has asked how can a cyst be formed due to dialysis? Ravi's cysts can be formed through dialysis because there's a lot of fluid that is being processed through, right? So what can happen is that they can be an infection at times, okay? They can be accumulation. Now cyst, what it does, the entire mechanism is unknown, to be honest. But one of the theories is that maybe there are growth factors that are present over there, and then there's a disconnection between the cells that are somewhat similar to polycystic kidney disease. So it's unknown, but at the same time, because there's altered epithelial growth, and so what happens is that there's formation of the cyst, and there's also accumulation of the serous fluid that occurs during the dialysis. Because dialysis is not a natural way of, processing toxic material from the body, like exiting toxic material from the body. So it usually happens, even though the entire mechanism is unknown. Like I said, as the book says, but one of the theories is that maybe it causes an alteration between the growth factors, and it causes accumulation of the fluids as well, which all results into, and the function of the cilia as well is affected, and this all results into causing formation of the cyst, which can either be, but that's how it goes about it. Okay, so moving on to polycystic dominant version of the cystic disease. Now, clinical features may include dilation of the cyst, and hemorrhage can cause pain, renal insufficiency, and renal colic. Other symptoms such as proteinuria, polyuria, and hypertension can develop. So you can have a patient who can have, I don't know how familiar you are with nephrotic and nephritic syndrome, but can have nephrotic, can have signs of nephrotic syndrome, and then so on and so forth. So it may also be confused initially with that, but then obviously there are investigations that are done, and then you can process that out that it's polycystic disease. Extrarenal symptoms include polycystic liver disease, intracranial aneurysms, mitral valve prolapse. Now what happens is that, as we've seen, that polycystic liver disease, so it's the same way. It can go on to, because of the cyst formation on the mitral valve itself. Mitral valve is one of the most prone valves that can be affected. So what happens is that there's formation of cyst on the mitral valves, and because it becomes heavy and boggy, it ends up not performing its function, and hence gets prolapsed. Autosomal recessive polycystic kidney disease, that is, can be differentiated with autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease on the basis of genetics. So it has these subcategories, which is perinatal, neonatal, infantile, and juvenile. So all of these names are self-explanatory. We know when can perinatal happen, we know when neonatal can be figured out, when infantile can be figured out, and juvenile according to different ages of the child. Mutation in PKHD1 gene, which is present on chromosome 16. Again, PKD1 was present on chromosome 16, and PKHD1 gene is also present on chromosome 16. Except the difference between the two will be, like I said in the slide before, so the short arm and the long arm, the position on that can help you differentiate whether it's, and the age obviously, that's whether it's dominant version of polycystic kidney disease or recessive version. So so as in polycystic dominant, we had polycystin. Here we have fibrocystin, which is also an integral membrane protein. So it's encoded on this particular chromosome, and hence is also mutated. So what does it do? It's present on cilium of tubular cells and function as cell surface receptor in collecting them. Now, polycystin was present. Basically, the pathogenesis of both of them are somewhat similar, because they both are ending up mutating a membrane, a protein, which is helping the cilium of tubular cells, right? But in that case, we had renal tubules, and in this case, you have particularly you have collecting ducts, which are being affected. Now, clinical features include periportal fibrosis, hepatic fibrosis. If we see upon gross examination, you'll see smooth external surface and multiple cysts seen on cut section in cortex and medulla. Now, this is important. Now, you'll see multiple cysts on cortex and medulla. Microscopic features will include secular dilation of collecting tubules with uniform lining of preferred cells. Like I said, things are going to be very similar, but there are few things that you can pick out easily, whether it's dominant, whether it's multicystic renal dysplasia, whether it's recessive polycystic. All right. Any questions so far? Okay, so this is a picture again taken from Robbins. It's showing that this compared to the dominant one, this has smaller cyst around it. And they're dilated channels, right angles to the cortical surface. So basically, there's smaller cysts. Now, what you have to do after you're done with this particular presentation is that you should go and you should open up Robbins and see all the pictures that are given to you over there, because it's very important for you to remember those. Okay, so moving on to cystic disease of renal medulla. Three major types are involved. You have medullary sponge kidney, you have nephronophthisis, you have adult onset medullary cystic disease. Now, when we're going to talk about, we talk about medullary sponge kidney as one topic, and then we talk about nephronophthisis and adult onset medullary cystic disease as one condition, even though they're supposed to be three different types. So medullary sponge kidney is basically a condition usually which occurs in adults. Multiple cystic dilations will be seen on collecting ducts of the medulla. So now we see that in medullary sponge kidney you have again dilation on collecting ducts, and how is it similar to polycystic recessive disease is they also have fibrocystin which is affected, right? And it was supposed to be on the collecting duct. So you need to make all these connections together in order to remember them. Renal function is usually normal and diagnosed upon radiography. The cysts are lined by cuboidal epithelium along with transitional epithelium. So you've got these. Now, how you can differentiate between medullary sponge kidney and others is that in case of medullary sponge kidney, you have cuboidal epithelium and you have transitional. The two epithelials that are being present, the two types of cells that are present. You have cuboidal and you have transitional. Nephronophthisis and adult onset medullary disease, it is defined as, in totality, if we see, it is defined as progressive renal disorders characterized by variable number of cysts in the medulla, usually concentrated at the corticomedullary junction. So let's just look into this first. So we're talking about it's a renal disorder like any other, with variable number of cysts. So you've got these cysts in the medulla. So location is very important, and it's usually concentrated as corticomedullary junction. So you have cysts which are present in the medulla, but mostly it's concentrated in corticomedullary junction. Initially, there is damage to distal tubule, eventually leading to tubular interstitial damage and progressing on to renal insufficiency. So when it causes damage to distal tubules, it will cause tubular interstitial deficiency, progressing it on to renal insufficiency. Nephrophthisis has three variants. It has number 1, familial juvenile, number 2, sporadic, which is non-familial, and number 3 is renal retinal dysplasia, which is basically kidney disease and accompanied by ocular lesions. So number 1, familial juvenile one is the most common one, and renal retinal, as the name itself is self-explanatory. It's a kidney disease which is accompanied with ocular lesions. So pathogenesis include so there are 16 gene focuses that are responsible for this disease, which starts from NPHP1 to NPHP11. Mutation in these genes will result into mutation of nephrocysteine, which causes syncope. Now, since the beginning of the one thing that has been common throughout all the diseases that we've talked about under the heading of cystic diseases is that there's been disturbance in the cilia. So what is happening is the cilia within the kidney is not working to its potential because it has been mutated. Alright, so the same thing goes for nephrocysteine as well. So nephrocysteine is also an integral protein, but it's mutated but all of these others are mutated because of the different genes that are associated with the mutation of these integral proteins. So NPHP1, in this case NPHP1 and NPHP11 is responsible for mutation of nephrocysteine and hence is causing celiac. In case of adult medullary cystic disease, it is autosomal dominant due to mutation in two genes, which is NKCD1 and NKCD2. So NPHP is basically in particularly for nephroptosis, and for adult medullary cystic disease, you have NKCD1 and 2, which are causing adult medullary cystic disease. So morphology. So if you look at it grossly, you will see cyst in medulla, and you will see that glomerular structure is preserved, and there is thickening of tubular membrane. Okay, so these are the things that occur over here, right? Um, so cyst in medulla, again, glomerular structure is preserved, thickening of tubular membrane, and in cyst, again, you will see there is cuboidal epithelium. Okay, so cuboidal epithelium is almost common in all of them, except when we talked about previously about medullary sponge kidney disease, in which case you have cuboidal and you have transitional epithelium. All right. So this is a gross picture which is showing um, medullary cystic disease, basically the cut section of the kidney. And so we talked about how it's mostly present at the junction of cortico-medullary junction. So all of these cysts are mostly around cortico-medullary junction around. All right. So clinical symptoms will again include polyuria, polydipsia, defect in concentrating of urine in tubules, sodium wasting, tubular acidosis, all of these things. Because there has been ciliopathy, so obviously the tubules are unable to concentrate the urine, which also results in sodium wasting. So you can also talk about how a patient can come to you with in the emergency with symptoms of hyponatremia. May come to you in the clinic with chronic hyponatremic, symptoms, or may have all these symptoms that you can talk about. Obviously, you have to evaluate the patient because there can be a lot. There can be other differentials as well. The patient might have diabetes insipidus because all of these are very similar to diabetes insipidus. So you have polyuria, polydipsia, and hence resulting into sodium wasting, and may also result into tubular acidosis. Okay. Now this also has extra-renal associations as well because it can occur as a part of a condition as well. So we talked about renal retinal dysplasia. So you can have retinal dystrophy. Other than that, you can also have liver fibrosis. You can have cerebellar abnormalities. Now, eventually, obviously, in this case also, the patient can progress into end-stage renal disease in, let's say, a case of 5 to 10 years. Any questions? Okay, so this chart is from Robbins. So this chart is from Robbins. If there are any questions you guys have, you can write it on the chat and I'll answer you. Acha. So Rabit, again, I'm going to answer this to you. There are various conditions that are mentioned in Robbins, but again, that is way too complicated and way too out of your course. So right now, I would not want you to go into it. Maybe you guys can look it up. Maybe you guys can see and read the conditions, their particular conditions. Like previously, we've talked about Turcot and Gardner syndrome in case of GIT, when there's also adenocarcinoma of the colon and you have all these other abnormalities with bone and everything, right? So it's similar way. You have cerebral abnormalities and you have kidney cysts. But they've talked about the conditions, but I thought it was way too out of your right now. Just remembering the conditions will not help you because usually they don't really show up in your OSCEs or in your BCQs mostly. They usually talk about the association, but they don't really mention, most of the BCQs that I've seen, they don't really mention or talk about the name of the condition. They usually just ask you about the association. So I think it will be just an extra information. If you guys want to learn and read that, that's all fine by me. But I think right now it will be too much. When you guys get done with like a good chunk of neuro, maybe then you can help it, you can remember it. But I personally don't feel there's any need of remembering things that are not. ठीक है, वैसे इतना सब कुछ पढ़ते हो तुम लोग. You guys are handling way too much, right? So चलो. Moving on, so this is for people who are lazy, who do not want to, go through the entire text. Lucky for you, there's a chart that's given in Robbins. Okay, so make sure that you at least, this is the bare minimum that you can do is go through this chart and go through the pictures that are present, so that at least you guys are able to attempt some part of the paper. Okay, and at least have an idea, have clear concepts. It's very good for revision and it's very good for if you don't have time. So let's just go through this. This will be a good review for us. Okay. So number one, we're talking about adult polycystic kidney disease, which is again adult mein hai, it's going to be dominant version. It's large multicystic kidneys, liver cysts, and they're going to be very aneurysm. These are the pathological features. Complication may include hematuria, flank pain, urinary tract infection, renal stones, hypertension. Chronic renal failure beginning at age 40 to 60 years. They've also given you a diagrammatic representation as well. Right? So there are multiple cysts that are present. In case of child with polycystic kidney disease, it's autosomal recessive in large cystic diseases at birth. Its complication includes hepatic fibrosis and may result in death in infancy or childhood. Medullary sponge kidney. So there is no inheritance pattern for this particularly, and there will be cyst on excretory urography. Hematuria, urinary tract infection, recurrent renal stones, and it's benign. And the one thing that we learned about it, which was important, was that it have transitional and cuboidal epithelium present. Familial juvenile nephrophthisis, autosomal recessive in its inheritance pattern. Corticomedullary cyst, shrunken kidneys, will cause salt wasting, polyuria, growth retardation, anemia. May also be very similar to diabetes insipidus or someone who's going through renal failure. So it has to be sorted and it has to be investigated in order to reach to conclusion of a familial juvenile nephropathy. And it causes progressive renal failure beginning in childhood. Adult onset medullary cystic disease, autosomal dominant. Again, corticomedullary cyst, shrunken kidneys, salt wasting, polyuria, chronic renal failure beginning in adulthood. Multicystic renal dysplasia, there's no inheritance pattern. It's irregular kidneys with cysts of variable sizes, association with other renal anomalies. Renal failure bilateral, surgically curable if unilateral. Acquired renal cystic disease, again cystic degeneration in case of end-stage kidney disease. Hemorrhagic erythrocytosis, neoplasia, dependence on dialysis is the outcome. Simple cyst, so it can either be single or multiple cyst in normal sized kidney, can cause microscopic hematuria and is benign. Now, for the first 4 ones, what is also important is the are the genes that are involved in it, right? And the integral proteins. In case of adult polycystic kidney disease, we talked about that you have PKD1 and 2 gene which affects polycystin 1 and 2. Um, that's important. In childhood polycystic kidney disease, you have fibrocystin that's been affected, again present on chromosome 16, so on and so forth. Nephrophysis, you have NPH, right? Let me just go back to NPHP. Right. So you have NPHP 1 till 11, which is being mutated. In case of adult medullary cystic disease, you have MKCD1 and 2, and the rest you guys will be able to talk about. Any questions? Anything you guys want to ask? So now the next step will be that we'll be uploading this on Edmodo. So please make sure that you go through this again. You guys can always, you're free to email any question that you come up with later. Number one, we can leave a message on Edmodo and we can discuss it. Also with this presentation, I'll be uploading an assignment for you, which is going to be a few BCQs, just to check whether you guys have gotten what I've taught you. If you guys have any questions regarding that as well, please do leave a message on Edmodo and that will be addressed. All right. Anything you guys want to talk about?